Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. I guess some will join us later. First of all, my name is Hélène Cray, and I will be chairing this session. It's a big honor for me, because I used to work in that domain before, but I have left it. So don't feel, feel indulgent if I say something wrong. I need also to discover a lot of things in this session, like I hope you will. Let me also introduce our speakers today. So I am very honored to welcome Dr. Philip Mills from Thales Group, who is working at the crossroad between business and engineering. I am also very honored to welcome Mrs. Maigre, Dr. Merle Maigre, a cybersecurity expert, and also who was the National Security Advisor of the President of Estonia. And finally, but last but not least, Professor Kostas Karitidis from the NTU. NTU is National Technical University in Athens. And Professor Karitidis also performed some studies for the Commission on the topic of today. So he's a recognized specialist. We have a session where the title is somehow ambiguous: Materials and Technologies Enabling 360 Degrees Progress. I hope you understand it means, of course, dual use. But dual use is not limited to civil defense. It's all the range of potential use. And some are really for space, for instance. Are they civilian? Are there other than civilian? So it's a large range of use. And this refers to enabling. The word enabling technologies, the technologies which are enabling a variety of use. So the question mark here is, what are we going to do? We have a new program. We will have a new program, Horizon Europe. We're supposed to be here for a co-creation exercise. Okay, it's difficult with seats and not around the table, but I hope you will be very interactive. And if you feel that it's boring, just tell me, because you have to contribute. Don't just listen and look at your mails. By the way, could you switch off your phones, please, so they don't ring during the session? That will help for the concentration. Here we have a link, a possible link in the proposal for Horizon Europe between the civilian objective of Horizon Europe, which is 100% civilian, and potential other utilizations. And we should do a kind of co-creation exercise. Why? Because both of them are mutually nourishing each other. And we cannot do a frontier. We can do it ethically. We can maybe do it on markets, but not on science and not on innovation. So I will stop here because I'm not the speaker. I'm just the moderator, the chair. And I hope you will find it interesting. I have asked the speakers to reduce a little bit their presentation so that you could raise a lot of questions. There will be mics circulating and even mics launched, as in other sessions. So be careful, take your helmet. And yes. Think already when you listen to the speakers, to the questions you would like to get an answer on, to really have a co-creation exercise. A very last point is that it's the third day, you surely know, but in case of not, this is to initiate a discussion. So feel free after the session to ask people not in the room but outside, because the room is occupied, then to take the people, the speakers, if they have time, me, I will stay for a few moments, the two organizers here we have, and rapporteur. So could you stand up? I have the pleasure to present Mr. Kotsikos and Mr. Stalios, who are the rapporteur, and go downstairs in the open space and discuss. Take a coffee and raise all the questions and continue the discussion. Thank you very much. Yeah, the Horizon Village also. These are free space to continue the discussion. And surely you will reach marvelous innovations and a lot of ideas to discuss during your weekend. So thank you very much for your attention. I would like now to give the floor to our first speaker, Mrs. Maigre.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to address such a distinguished audience on a topic of technologies enabling 360 degrees progress. As a short background, my own approach, as I focus in my intervention on cybersecurity, my own approach to cybersecurity comes indeed, as mentioned, from a strategic end. While I'm currently looking at cybersecurity from the private sector, from an Estonian cybersecurity company, I used to be thinking and having the privilege of dealing with the decision-making related with security and cybersecurity while working for the president, and also that's at the national level, and also working with the NATO Secretary General, so thereby looking at how NATO is developing in discussing cybersecurity. In politics, but now down to this topic. In politics and in diplomacy, the dual use refers to technology that can be used both for peaceful and for military aims. When we speak of cybersecurity, I think it's important to reflect that the whole world of cybersecurity actually really began in the military research. When we think of Alan Turing, for example, during the Second World War, and his work decrypting Enigma, or the origins of the World Wide Web in DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, we recognize that this, like so many other technological innovations, originated in the military and defense establishment. Yet, of course, we shouldn't confuse the past origin with the present, just as we are not really thinking that NASA invented Velcro when we do our morning run and sit down to fasten our running shoes. In my intervention, I will discuss how the civil research results and technologies have had an impact on the security and defense, and also vice versa. I look at how innovative cybersecurity technologies can have an effect on increasing the situational awareness of both business processes, business leaders, and military commanders. More specifically, I'm focusing on the application of visual analytics to cyber exercises. So, what is a cyber exercise? A cyber exercise in general is like any other exercise, is like a fire drill. Cyber defense exercises, they simulate real-world operations of an organization that comes under a cyber attack by an unknown offender. They last anything between 1 to several days, and they include essentially 3 phases. First part is familiarization with the GameNet infrastructure. Secondly, the hands-on training experience, the very implication of the exercise itself. And then thirdly, the evaluation phase. Participants very often work in teams on several issues at a time. More and more, we've noticed, and research tells us, both civil and military organizations are looking to cyber exercises to improve their incident response effectiveness, to upskill staff, and to tackle the cybersecurity talent gap. Because a live fire cyber defense exercise, a red on blue exercise, really provides a very safe sandbox environment for participating teams to stress the organizational processes and challenge their capabilities. So they do so by responding to real-world cyber incidents through a very realistic simulation. So what does a red on blue actually mean? A red team in a cyber exercise imitates real-world attacks that can hit any organization, be it civil or military. They perform all the necessary steps that a real attacker would do. they sort of provide the live fire element in these exercises. What makes a blue team different is that they are the ones who find ways to defend, change and regroup defense mechanisms to make the incident response stronger. A red on blue incident response training session typically takes place in a cyber range. A cyber range can serve as a sort of virtual training ground for cyber exercises. Cyber range is a powerful ITC system with a unique set of characteristics of hardware and software that imitate the actual computer networks and data traffic. It is this simulated cyber exercise environment where all the technology, all the infrastructure and all the test beds are specifically created in virtual environments. This enables to everybody to practice cyber defense and test the resistance of the IT systems without really hampering or breaking down the real systems. So for that you need to create a virtual system. And the cyber range can be safely accessed remotely from all around the world. But why do exercises need visualization, and what can actually a visualization add to the cybersecurity technology? Ample research has proven that visual analytics prove highly beneficial for cyber exercises organization, for their execution and for the evaluation. It just is that cybersecurity tools often lack visualization, and yet it is visualization that most impacts how cybersecurity teams interact with data. And the user's ability to digest the data is ultimately the true measure for success. This is for the actual teams responsible for the protection, and for the leadership. As long as you don't understand what goes on during a cyber exercise, you can't really support or wholeheartedly get the most out of this training experience. So demystifying cyber and making the top leadership understand what really goes on, I know from first-hand experience from working with cyber commanders and the president that that becomes very handy. So CyberXer Technologies cyber exercises visualization tool, which you can see here, is called the Integrated Scoring and Awareness Solution. It focuses on real-time instant visualization and comparison of exercise data. The solution is based on 8 years of research and experience in conducting complex exercises, including in cooperation with the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence located in Tallinn. This visualization also won NATO Defense and Innovation Award last year in May, and it comprehensively captures all exercise data and makes observing the exercises more understandable. But let's drill down and look at what really makes a good visualization of a cyber exercise and where do we go from there. So first, I believe it is important in an exercise to emphasize the context. This is, again, for the leadership, for the decision makers. It's important for them to understand what do these technical hacks mean for them. What does it mean for the company? What does it mean for the military commander? And providing a context in form of breaking news, you can render these technical glitches and hacks more clear. Secondly, visualization provides an overview of the game net of the exercise. A good visualization should give you an overview of the structure and the state of the exercise game net. It should help to monitor the exercise proceedings. It should make you help understand where the exercise is, if it is a several-day event. It is beneficial for the situational awareness. It provides insight into the state and development of the exercise. And with this approach, different factors of the cyber defense exercise, such as defense, attacks, success, and failure, become more traceable and understandable. There you can see where exactly the red team is, which systems the red team attack, for example, has rendered unavailable, or which systems the red team has had opportunity to compromise. Wrapping up, other examples of visualization include team scoring, so that you can understand live, transparency accurately and understandably to all players, but also the judges and the observers, how each team is doing. And each blue team can, in the course of the exercise, place themselves to where they are vis-à-vis the others, and thereby, if they so wish, to modify their tactics. Last but not least, part of a visualization in an exercise is about the division of roles in one team. You can see how this reveals different team strategies. So summing up, cyber exercises are complex education events requiring a significant amount of effort of interdisciplinary teams. And application of this visual can help both the organization and the evaluation. Visualization makes these seemingly complex cyber exercises understandable for both the top military brass, but also the top corporate executives. Presidents, cyber commanders, chiefs of defense, ministers, they all have a better understanding when they walk into an exercise and they get to understand what really goes on.
I love technology. Thank you very much. It was very interesting, and I'm sure that everyone having teenagers home understand this type of screen, but for gaming, mine are terrible for that. What is interesting also, and where I would like to launch a little bit the ball in the view of further questions, is that you can easily change the word attack with natural disaster. You can easily see an answer to, for instance, an epidemic, which has no link with an attack, but it's just happening. So the border between critical situation, crisis situation, whether they are civilian purely or defense ones, but the border is disappearing. So the answer is useful for any situation. And that is the first point which seems to me very critical. We cannot have a split. The word is mixed now. The second maybe is that the exchange, the role of various teams, it's the same issue. One of the major things when you answer health pandemia is who does what. It's not the number of vaccines, it's the most efficient organizational way. And this is the same situation, whether you speak on military or civilian. I stop here and I would like to give the floor to our next speaker. Dr. Mills, please. The floor is yours.
Okay, so good morning. So I'm Philippis. I'm working in Thales Research and Technology Center in the south of Paris. And as you know, Thales is a 80,000 people company. Half of its activity is on civilian activity and half is in defense. And then we have acquired Gemalto very recently, so it gives us also some quite important knowledge in the security domain. Here in that presentation, I will go to some thoughts and lessons learned on making some research with dual use objective. Okay, so in that, just I switch this slide because it has been already introduced, so no need to say it again. First, just to understand what's the problem of a dual use. Always, when you develop a technology or a product, you have to answer three questions. First, you need to develop a technology, you need to address some user needs, and you need to have a market for it. And when you start to talk about dual use, maybe as you can see on the picture, this is a digital tablet. You understand very well that the technology seems very similar, but the end user and the needs are completely different, and this changes a lot of things. So just to explain that dual use is not just using a technology by an end user. Dual use comes also with integration. When you develop something, you start by using skills which are there in the research center, for example, and then progressively you integrate it on a board, in a subsystem, in a component, in a system of systems. And the more you integrate, the more you go up toward the end user use, you reduce the scope of dual use possibility. There is no more dual use. So the triangle you see is the dual use area. On the right side, you see defense use, for example, and on the left side, the civil use. And then when you go up, much often, you have to leave the dual use zone. So dual use is also a question, the potential of dual use depends where you are. So just to give some example of what we can encounter, you can see the Galileo GPS GLONASS, the GNSS constellations, which were developed first in the defense, and Galileo was open to military and civil application. At the bottom, you can see the ARPANET network, which has been invented by the DARPA, and then that today became to be the internet, which is widely different, but very similar also to its initial form. You can see an inertial measurement unit, which is developed by Thales, and which is integrated both in military ground vehicle, for example, or aircraft, and that is used also in civilian aircrafts. So this is kind of dual use of technology. And you can see also GPU, which has been developed for the gaming market, and that is now widely used also in military solution. But in many cases, when you move from one domain to another, you have to adapt. And adapt may means a lot. This is an example, something interesting you know maybe about. This is Curiosity, and Curiosity is equipped with a laser technology, which initially has been developed by Thales. It's a product which is called DIVA. It's a pulse, it's a diode pumped laser which is pulsed, and you can see the functional specs on the bottom. And we were asked to put that laser on Curiosity to make samples of rocks and make analysis of these rocks by different means that Thales was not in charge. So the question was very simple. We have to keep this functional characteristic, but we have some different constraints that we have to match. For example, size reduction by a factor of 15 and 20, weight reduction from 8 kilos to 500 grams, and so on. And these, as you can see on the left side, required a lot of adaptation, so much adaptation that we have to go back down to the skills and the patents that were used to develop that laser and to redevelop at 100% that technology. So when you move from one domain to another domain, it's a question. It may be a question of adaptation, and this adaptation may be extremely important. Let's give a more wider view on that kind of adaptation. There are four types of adaptation that we have to face, we have to address. We have technology constraint, as we already mentioned in the previous example, but we have also industrial constraints, We have to redevelop or redefine the supply chain, because when you are making a product for 1,000 or 100 of 1,000 items, or for 2 items, you are not putting in place the same supply chain. It's very different. You have a defense accreditation of suppliers. You have a lot of industrial constraints that you have to address. You have also market constraints, size of the market, time to market, security of supply. You have all this kind of constraints to address. And you have also legal constraints, as you may imagine, when you have to address military domain. So, by the end, when you have to move one technology to another domain, you have to reanalyze all these dimensions, and you end up most of the time with a very different solution than the one you were coming from. So, as a conclusion for that, when you move from a domain to another one, you have to go down, you have to downshift the TRL from what level it is down to 3, because all these elements have to be reanalyzed. However, best practice would be to promote a proactive approach. In real life, when we are developing technology in the research center, for example, we have in mind one usage in particular. But in avoiding some other usage, we may miss some opportunities in terms of optimization of a value of a supply chain, of the volume of production, of balance of a number of production lines, and so on. So, just few conclusions. I don't want to give too many messages. Just we guess we have this one to remember. When you switch from civil to defense, or more generally speaking, to another domain, this happens most of the time in an unpredictable way. You couldn't expect that GPUs would be used for military application. It was not expected at all. Managed duality can generate a lot of opportunities, but it's something which is quite complex to address, because you have to address different kind of markets, all the aspects I presented before have to be thought all together on different perspectives. More potential exists for duality for deep techs. I mean the technologies which are deeply embedded in the systems. Because when you go upstairs, as the picture showed, you are reducing the duality possibility when you go toward the usages. And when you have to make that adaptation, consider that you have to downshift the TRL down to TRL 3. Okay. So some recommendation as a conclusion of this presentation. First. If we have to face policy constraints in the research project, it's very difficult, and even doesn't make really sense to put policy constraints when you are below TRL 3, because on the skills and the materials themselves, you cannot, you don't know exactly what will be the usages, the scope of usages. So putting policies at this level doesn't make really sense. When there are ethical constraints that exist for such kind of project, we have to think to put a mechanism in place so that we can relax or re-examine these constraints. Because if we prevent dual use, we are probably missing some opportunities in a market perspective. Let's imagine that you have a technology. Okay, it's just for civil. Okay, fine. Then the American people develop the same one, put it is completely open. So you are in a competition with a country which has more freedom than you to save money in developing technology. So it can be an issue. For sure, on the different aspect I showed previously on the dimension that needs to be addressed when you adapt a technology, we are not very good at doing this. Just raising up a TRL or going up in the TRL scale is not enough. We need also to to be better in engineering the manufacturing readiness level. We need to be better at engineering the supply chain, the customer's needs, the market readiness. All these elements need to be better engineered when you are doing a research project for ITRL project, I would say. And then on that, we are lacking of guidance. There are a lot of tools which are existing that can be helpful, but there is nothing really, there is no kind of body of knowledge which exists and that could be used by the researchers to help them to take into account this dimension when setting up and operating a research project. Okay, so that's all the message I had for this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to quote one of our previous Director General. She said, when the first time we were discussing on dual use, she said something which stayed in my memory. She said, anyhow, everything we do as innovation could be used for military applications. Could be, I would change in it, could be developed into a military application. She was right. If you look a little bit on all the discoveries, all the new things arriving, she is right. What I mean by that is, thank you very much for this, because the exchanges are not from one box to another one. It's a continuous process. And the market readiness could be analyzed, the TRL could be also analyzed in the light of the word enabling. What I mean by that is that the way you find something and you look at a potential other application, whether you come from civil to security, from security to military, from military to whatsoever, space and whatsoever, but you just need to go down, go to enabling level, and go up to develop something new. This is a richness, in a way. This is a richness of innovation and science. How could we favor that, taking into account, of course, respecting ethical rules? This is a core question that we ask, because this is exactly the link between Horizon Europe, the future Horizon Europe, and the future defense program. I stop here because I'm not a speaker, and I give the floor to the last speakers. You have enough to think to prepare your questions. So, Mr. Karitidis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. George, Achilleas also. Yeah. Sorry. Already in the title of our lab, there are 3 technologies and materials: composite materials, nanomaterials, and nanotechnologies impose possible dual use. The scope of the presentation for the next 10 minutes, I will try to show you some figures and some comments and facts on the dual use issues and in order to boost the discussion. Here it is. This is the new definition for dual use from the European Parliament, and it is for the next framework program for the Horizon Europe. With this definition, we have what Ellen said before: enough space to build synergies between civil and defense or military or what else research. Let's see a little bit what is the flow of technology from the Second War till now. From the Second War, the flow is from military or defense or security technology to civilian. Now we have reverse. From civilian, the flow is from civilian to military applications. This is the global trend, and there is a contradiction with what is the trend in Europe. If we check the legislation in Horizon 2020, there are 2 issues, two comments. All of you, I am sure that you know that comments restrict a little bit even the exchange of samples. And I think that this discussion paper is very good. And the conclusion is the concern that Europe's competitors are gaining ground in their relative military strength and high technology army capabilities. This is the main conclusion. Here are some figures. See in the diagram what is the total R&D spending in billions, US billions, in the United States and Europe. It's coming, the information is coming from Nature this year. For some specific reasons, Europe is close to 65 billion dollars. But it's of interest to see this. Does it work? Anyway, to see that the academic share is only 1.7 concerning the European academic institutes have received this small fraction from the 44 million for defense-related R&D in the 2016-2015. This is 17, sorry. There is an obvious contradiction, since in Horizon 2020, see the blue line, the blue color, the academic participation in the implementation of innovation, R&D, is almost 40%. And if we see what are the predictions in Horizon Europe for European Defence Fund, about 13 billions, you can see that we have to see how we will ensure that money will go for defense and who will implement this research for defense-oriented research. Let's say, who will coordinate and how? In United States of America, it is quite clear and straight. NARPA has the strategic for this type of actions. In Russia, it's the Russian Foundation for Advanced Research Projects in the defense industry. They are responsible for the strategy, one body. Of course, they work with too many other bodies. And let's see the situation here in Greece. Basically, we have the European Commission and we have the European Defence Agency. This this table is just to show you the CapTechs, that is the capability technology groups, and you can see clearly what technologies have been are included in the research for defense and security. Let's see, what is the division between civilian and military-oriented? From this screen, you can see that there are ethical barriers, there are cultural barriers, knowledge barriers, but the most important are the hard barriers, and hard barriers or structural barriers. What is the difference between civilian and defense-oriented research and innovation? The product lifetime, the volume of production, completely different, the development specificity, the motivation for technical change, and finally, differences in funding procedures. Synergies. If we want for SMEs to participate in this type of research, we have to work for this. In states, they have done it. Not in Europe. SMEs should work more. SMEs, I mean, with research oriented in dual-use research. They have to network more close with academic groups. And of course, defense policies, since they usually restrict engagement of SMEs, not only for dual-use applications or for defense research. What we suggest, annual conferences like the OX Defense, a dual-use oriented European cluster or council, a matchmaking platform for dual-use oriented projects, an open database, contacts with regional organizations and clusters representing in the European network of defense-related regions. Because in Europe, the situation is it's not so straightforward like it is in States or in Japan or in China or even Russia. We have also the national regulation and legislation about the standards of the product and so on. So the last one, the European network of defense-related regions, is very, very important. Also, training. We need joint training programs for researchers in civilian and defense sectors to enhance the interactions, and an active group to monitor all dual-use research. A lot of guidelines have been produced last 5 years. Janus project, Dr. Stalios was responsible for that. The opinion on responsible dual use, guidelines for researchers on dual use and issue of research, technical report on dual use again. This is another handbook for defense-related SMEs, EU funding for dual use. And finally, there is a running project that is addressing good practices in dual-use research and protecting generating. Again, from your unit, Achilles, you are responsible. You remember this project very well. And to conclude, coordination activities, coordination action is needed in dual use. We have 3 main transitions Europe to successfully go through: climate, ecological, social, and economic. Dual use has a potential to become a strong parameter influencing a more efficient use of research funding in Europe. But please don't imitate the existing value of death, and I am talking for the death between TRL 5 and TRL 7. This syndrome with defense-oriented research, if we have the same syndrome that we have already, it will be very problematic. This value of death should be minimized for this type of research. Is a need. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our speakers. C'est difficile avec le micro. So, we had some very different but interesting presentation. The first time I worked in dual use, because I was in charge, my previous unit was dealing with these studies, we initiated it. Of course, your first reaction is, but we are EU, we are built on peace. Why the hell are we developing military applications? What is our role in that? Where is the paradox? And especially on research. And I can remember very tough discussions with some of my colleagues telling, even if it's not foreseen, if they go to a military application, we will not give them money into Horizon 2020. And they say, no, this is not the right way. Science is science. Everything could be badly used or wrongly used, and everything could be well used for another application. So this paradox is inherent. And it is covered by all our ethical rules. That's why there was this guideline. The second thing is, you spoke on DARPA. DARPA, 50 states, 1 country. We are 28 states and 28 countries. Still. What I mean by that is, how can we transfer the handicap, in our case, to be 28 and having some differences in the assessment of the role of research in defense? How can we transfer this handicap, in a way, into an advantage? But an advantage for our people, for our researchers, for our welfare. So the link between military or defense and security and civilian is not only blurred, it is critical. Because it is part of the innovation, part of what will build our progress. And this is something which is very difficult to understand for normal people, because they say, but it's military. No, but it's just research also first. It's just innovation. Then a third handicap is, of course, going to the market. We face enormous difficulties in doing that for, let's say, civilian technologies, between brackets. How do we integrate things which could then be derived into defense use? This is a critical question, because we are 28 also. And some points are linked to that, for instance, and then I will stop after that. Some questions I am putting to you, you can take them or not, put your own remarks. The issue of certification, for instance. Consistency, norms, standards. Consistency between various norms, standards, requirements. Usually when you develop an application, you have one buyer, the Minister of Defense. So it has their own criteria. It's not only to go back to TRL, but the certification issue is an issue. Confidentiality, secrecy, which is very often also something in the imagination. Huh? It has inconsciently, it is very important, this issue of secrecy and confidentiality. But how to handle it? The time to market, you spoke about that. Yes, it's different in the two cases. The production volumes, we're not going to produce in enormous quantities because we produce for a specific need. When the two sides, or for me, I see a continuity, but when there is a strong divergence, where is our interest and what should we do? And last, all these questions about what we can do, we as EU, as you, because you are EU citizen. Huh? So what do you want to do, us to do? But that's now the question for you. So could we have the mic? Yes. 1 second. We will do a little bit interactive. I'm not sure the people dealing with military are used. Yes, I want to use it. I find it fun. Who wants to speak first? Take the up. Take it. Speak.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. I'd like to make 2 points. The first concerns the first presentation. The word virus, as we use it, has two very, very distinct meanings. One could be a computer virus, and another one could be a virus that causes a pandemic, a disease like SARS, for example, that spread throughout the whole world, just like a computer virus can spread throughout the whole world. It is well known that people have worked together in the same methodology, the same computer simulations on how a network can be robust against an attack by any kind of virus, including whether it's a disease or it's a computer appointment. So there is progress in science, in network theory, that combine both of these approaches, and they have been very successful. This has been since the 2000s, for the last 15 years or so. I have a second question, very quick question. The numbers that you give us in terms of percentages of GDP that is spent on military applications, how confidential are they? How true are they? How can we know that they are realistic and they reflect exactly what each country really spends in military applications?
I would like all people, I know it's totally unfair, but to limit to 1, maximum 2 minutes, each of them, so that you can throw it out to the next one. Be interactive. Thank you.
Thank you, Hélène. Good morning, citizens. My name is Angelos Karlaftis, Epafos Advisors. We represent here Urania and Helios Space and Defense Group. The question, of course, is to Philippe. Philippe, what do you mean ethical constraints? So, with paradigms, not general. What exactly are these ethical constraints that you are facing? Ellen, we have overpassed this problem with the citizens about the defense. Nowadays, our movement sees the citizens as armed, like in Switzerland. Thank you.
But third question, and then the speakers will answer, and then we have an next row.
Okay. Okay, Gerd Schumacher, National Contact Point Materials in Germany. Do you understand me?
Close to you.
Yeah, I have it here. Yeah. I would like to shift it a little bit to materials from digital, from the Hype Digital. So the question for me is also, doesn't this mean that if we want to have a sustainable and safe Europe, that we also have to keep expertise here, that we also have to consider if we let certain expertise go to other world regions. For example, steel making. If we accept that steel making is done in the future in Asia, just in Asia, and we don't have the capability to do that anymore, isn't that a security risk? Thank you.
So, would you like to answer? Maybe you first, and then Kostas?
Yeah, on the ethical question, yeah, I just referred to the constraints we have when we are submitting a project, we are setting up research project, we have constraints on the usage of technology which are developed in the project to be fully civilian, for example, and that may be an issue because, as I explained, if we try to open wider the usage of a technology, we can make more efficient the way we will develop it and the way we will reach the market for both civilian and military or security usage. So I think the ethical constraints may be a risk factor for the success of project. I don't mean that they don't have to exist. I mean that we have to take care of the way they are defined because they can put at risk the process of issuing the technology on production and on the market.
Yeah. For the second question about the steel, I think that the answer is in the issue of confidentiality already. You mentioned already confidentiality. But exactly the same happened with European companies like BMW, like Mercedes-Daimler. They put their production in China, and obviously they have this technology have been copied already. Not now, 5-6 years back. But the consequences of a possible situation, such situation with security is very important. So we have to think carefully confidentiality about this type of research, especially if it is public money for this type of research. And for the Professor Irakis, because it's again for financial figures and so on, all figures in my presentation was from Horizon Europe or Horizon 2020 and ESF for United States of America. If some nations spend more money, there is no way to check carefully and to know they can spend money.
May I also comment on these
Yes,
three questions?
please.
On the talent gap, while I'm not an expert on steel industry, I can totally see the parallel in digital sphere. I very much agree with you that we need to maintain the talents here in Europe. I mean, I can think of quantum computing, AI-related research. And moreover, I think it's important when thinking of the EU support mechanisms for research and development or the national governmental level, government as a client. Speaking from Estonian experience, focusing on cryptography, for example, there is this debate about the government being a wise client, and for that also you need to understand, need to have some basic understandings, even if you accept that the talent is there in the private sector, for example, that you need to be wise to write out the criteria, to be a wise orderer writing up the tenders. On the viruses, I agree. 2017 has seen SARS, has seen Ebola, but also viruses like NotPetya or WannaCry that have hit the UK national health systems, that have hit the huge Danish shipping company Maersk, or that have stopped the German railway. Ways to stop that in the digital sphere, deal with very basic start with very basic awareness and cyber hygiene, which is crucial. And there, the second point of one is visualizing exercises, which is like fire drills. But the second is very important for these business leaderships to be able to invest money early enough into the cybersecurity systems. The top leadership needs to understand the risks that technical and cyber risks can pose to the business processes. And for that, it is also important to visualize and to map very clearly how specific cyber incidents have influence on specific business procedures, business processes, so that you can have the understanding at the very top level that cybersecurity is something not left to the techies down in the cellar who are often underfinanced, but is something that is detrimental for the good operation of business.
Le mic. Launch the mic, please. Where is the mic?
It's a new game.
Yes. Very good.
It can be dangerous.
Yeah.
So my name is Idan Mahmud. I'm a university professor in Romania, and I'm representing the Black Sea Universities Network. So we discovered in the last decade in the Black Sea region, after the Crimean issue in 2014, that the confrontations today are hybrid. And then everybody started to work to discuss about hybrid war, hybrid conflicts, hybridization, and everything like that. But many of them, they are forgetting that this hybridization is not a discovery of the last decade. This is something that was happening even for centuries. So, if, for instance, in Romania, many of the investors, let's say from Israel, are undercover officers or retired officers, and they are in service, even being a very wealthy businessman and doing just business. So from that perspective, I think it is the time when we are talking about the dual use to understand the profound concept of hybridization and what that means in the context of today's world. Because today we can have, let's say, weapons starting from, let's say, economical aspects, from education aspects. Sometimes universities could be defense institutions and many other aspects like that. So I would like to have the comments on this aspect.
May I ask also the questions to maybe help us a little bit by giving us ideas on what we can do, what you expect from us, EU, whether it's EDA or the Commission, because we're here for Research and Innovation Days, although some remarks are very, very good. Next, where you launched the, yes?
My name is Nikanelopoulos. Can I hear? Okay. I'd like to point out how important is military sector for countries with large defense budget, like Greece, for instance. It's very difficult for a Greek SME with a new technology to become globally competitive. But for the military sector, since the client is the state, it's a two-stage process. So it's easy for an SME to grow first under the protection of the first stage and then become globally competitive. And we should see why this is not happening, because in the past, actually I had a spin-off in this area. We should see how this as a way of enhancing promoting SMEs to become competitive.
Two last questions, yes? Two ladies, finally. Who said defense is a male word?
Well, my question is not so much defense related. I'm on I'm at the university here in Leuven in Belgium. At the university it's very difficult to get funding for basic research. I mean, you can easily get funding for applied research, both regional funding and European funding, but there's very little resources for this TRL 0 to 3. So if I want to ask something here, is it possible to combine Horizon 2020 funding, the new framework with defense funding for this level of TRL 0 to 3? Because I think it benefits both civilian and military applications, and it can really be very important to tackle one of the major issues in civilian life, like batteries, for example.
Last one.
My question is for
Mike.
For Ms. Merle-Maigret. My question is related with the supercomputing needs of energy. If I have some data that I collected from EMRS Congress, Chinese computer Sunway needs 17,000 megawatts of energy, and Japan computers 10 megawatts. Then there is a increase of the need on energy because of data storage that is scheduled to increase from 2018 to 2030 from a demand of 200 terawatt hour to 2,000 terawatt hour. Then are we prepared in Europe to increase the storage of data for Europe? We are really prepared. Are the materials can play a role, for example, to harvesting heat generated to these equipment and to reduce the consume of energy to these systems?
Yes, a quick answer from the three speakers as last words, because we are close to the end.
I think it was more statements or comments, not so questions. I mean, I agree with you for hybridization, but what do you expect in terms of question? It's more a comment. What Professor Kanellopoulos said before, it's again a comment for participation of SMEs. Of course, we have to prepare this participation because it is already problematic in terms of their real participation in research, in civilian research. So we need special measures to enhance them. And what was the last one for TRL? Of course, it's open in discussions are open for Horizon Europe for research with low TRL 1 to 3 and funding. I think the dialogue is open and there is a suggestion from you for direct connection of low TRL with...
Yeah, I think for low TRL there is no reason to make a difference between civilian and military research. It can be used in both domains. So.
Commenting on the hybrid warfare and hybrid conflict, which is close to my heart, especially in my previous role as I was served as the Secretary to the National Defense Council during 2014 occupation of Crimea. Surely, and I very much agree, and I see NATO waking up to the reality that any military operation these days is so much dependent on the civilian part, the functioning of ports, the functioning of bridges, for the mere logistics, not to mention the functioning of electricity and communications for any military commander to be able to commute and operate. So understanding how the civil military cooperation and civil military interdependencies is very clear and present, and I see that fortunately also happening with the European Defence Fund funding ways to promote more thinking. On the storage of data, I admit, I don't think we've given it a thought about how much energy it requires, but at the same time, I think it's important also to understand the glass not just being half empty of recognizing how much more energy it requires, but also looking at the big data and open data, and besides storage, speaking from Estonia's example or experience, it's important to see what country, government, or EU, for that matter, can do with that data that can serve the citizens. Naturally, it has to be within the framework of the privacy and not pass the privacy, but so that open data can actually be useful to improve the services given to citizens.
Well, this is a very interesting debate, so you can continue it. Just by the way, we have research focusing on saving energy from computers and reducing the consumption of computers. This is a big part of our program in Horizon 2020 and will be also in Horizon Europe. I have to close here. I would like to thank the audience. Please don't forget that you are encouraged to have ideas and go downstairs to take a coffee and continue discussion. Be sure that even if we did not answer or comment your comments, they are recorded and we will consider them. We will debrief our hierarchy and we will take them into account. So it's not only what is here, it's what will come later. And feel free to continue contributing to what you want the EU to do for you. Thank you very much for your attention and have a nice day.